And action. Jay had a question about bulking up. Bulking up is a term that a lot of my young guys use for when they want to get muscular in the gym. And I think it's an important goal to have. I don't think it should be the only goal. Actually, exercise should be in everybody's lifestyle change. And it should be the first line treatment for any disease process, whether it's depression, high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, multiple sclerosis. I think activity has to be personally designed. If we're not active, I think it's setting us up as a society for disease, and we're already full of disease. 30 to 40% of Americans are overweight, adults. 2/3 of kids in the U.S. are overweight, and it just doesn't work. It's not working out as far as having exercise as a priority now. Now, as far as those of you who do exercise, like Jay, when you're in a sport already and you're adding exercise on your own in the gym, I think I'd want you, if you're dedicating your life and your time to it, I'd want to have the best gains. So there's formulas that are out there, but I use science. As a physician, I have to use science. And the exercise physiologists that are all over the U.S. and Canada have put some great information together. I follow Jay Hoffman out of University of Central Florida. I used to be the team physician for UCF. And Jay has some old studies that he did way back when, and they're still valid. Stuart Phillips out of McMaster University, fantastic new information on the way protein and exercise and choice of exercise and rest is important. And then there's Chris Gardner out of Stanford. Chris Gardner is more of a registered dietitian type scientist, but he's done great information about obesity, weight loss diets, and continues to put out great studies. So my suggestion is to have 3 basic rules or 3 basic pointers. Number 1, if you're trying to bulk up, you have to have some form of knowledge as far as what to do and how to do it in the gym. If you're not sure, you can get some ideas by watching YouTube, but you really should hire a coach and or have a group that you go with. I think if you just experience CrossFit, these guys are pretty decent because they're slinging weights around aggressively and doing a lot of plyometric exercise, calisthenic type exercises. So if you just experience that and watch, you might be able to pick up a couple things and watch their form and adopt it to your own exercise. If you can't or don't have a CrossFit place, hire a personal trainer, hire a coach, or get to a physical therapist on your insurance, and hopefully you'll get somebody in that bunch of names that'll teach you or design something for you. So you have to have some form of resistance. If you're working a body part like arms and you want to get arms big, I would try to shoot for 3 movements for that one body part. Every body part should have an exercise movement. The movements for the legs usually will tolerate more repetitions than the movements for the upper body. So typically, if you're trying to do bulk work, you do 6 repetitions, maybe 3 sets for all body parts north of the waist. And for legs, you do about 6 to 10 repetitions and 3 sets again. Now, if you're working on arms, biceps, triceps, you want to do 3 body part movements, 3 different movements for that one body part that you're working on. That's the way I would do it. Certainly, you can do that for all of them, but that would keep you in the gym for a long amount of time. So this is also to be practical. If you're a graduate student, if you're working 50 hours a week like me, if you don't have access to a gym and or you're taking care of kids, then you want to truncate that to as little time as possible. So usually resistance training. I like circuit training where you go back to back to back to back. No rest between sets. Joe Weider came up with that back in the 70s and 80s, and I think it's a concept that is stuck. In fact, you'll see a lot of CrossFit guys, you see a lot of high-intensity interval trainers to follow that same concept. No need for rest. Now, certainly your heart rate's going to be super high. Your perceived exertion will be out the roof. You'll be short of breath and panting between sets, almost like you're weak because you haven't caught your breath. But you'll get that endurance up and you'll get used to it. The idea is to start, have a goal, maybe take it easy with the intensity you push, but as you build up over the course of 3 months, you should be able to blast through that and develop your own routine. That's how I did it, and that's taken me about 2 decades to kind of tailor make it, and I'll probably have to change it again when I turn 60 in a couple of years, but the idea again is to maximize your effort, minimize your suffering. The high intensity interval trainers, like the CrossFit guys, I would do that form of resistance training. I'd also mix in, and you're going to have to do some form of resistance training 6 days a week. That's just it. If you're already in a sport like you, Jay, with a crew team, and then you're going to be doing a little bit of a bulk movement or maximum weight or size gain by 3 months, and it happens to be crew season, you're going to suffer somewhere. It's going to be, you can't gain too much muscle without having some soreness, some muscle ache. Delayed onset muscle pain is probably expected for a good workout. The tendons usually will suffer a bit. That's why if you maximize on your sleep, maximize on your nutrition, and work on your flexibility, you'll have that also truncated. The suffering will be less. I love turmeric and yoga, but we'll talk about that later. So you have to have some form of resistance training, maybe 6 days a week, but vary it up. High intensity interval training, 4 days a week. Circuit training, 2 days a week. And then something of a group therapy, or not group therapy, but group activity where you can have the strength of the group push you on. And that'd be a competition of some sort or work with a coach. I think that's the formula that I would get if I'm starting out. And again, the circuit training, I put this little, it's supposed to be a stepwise increase, but the circuit training can't just be one flat routine and you keep it that for years. You really have to you have to shoot for a maximum lift, a maximum intensity effort. Sometimes, as Jay Hoffman in his studies, he'll go with 1 rep maximums or maximum lifts. I think if you go for that goal, whether it's a shortened amount of time that you can do an interval, a maximum amount of lift, or a certain amount of repetitions, whatever it is, you have that goal in front of you in about 3 months. If you can keep that goal in front of you in 3 months and get to that point, it'll keep you on your toes. You'll have that designated downtime or a goal to be shooting for at all times and keep you inspired. Accountability would always be there too if your coach is there too, but again, I think I'd usually get to that goal, and then after the goal is hit, you take a little bit of a break, not 100%, and you set another goal for 3 months. So if you do that goal where you're always hitting something of a peak in 3 months, then your ultimate peak at 50 to 60 years of age will be also reached too. You just have to be careful about overtraining. Overtraining can be interpreted as increased pain, a big injury, that's not going to be a good thing, or sometimes hitting the wall with energy, hitting the wall with fatigue, hitting the wall with gains. That is overtraining. And sometimes if you have a good doc, I think a doctor can spot that, sports medicine if you can find it, a trainer can spot that, a coach will spot that, or if you're just not getting anyone, you're plateauing on your either your gains of muscle or your weight loss, that's when you come in and get some added help. So watch out for it. Second point that's really important is protein. Your nutrition will go nowhere unless you have resistance or exercise activity. And by the same token, exercise activity will go nowhere if you're starving yourself. That concept of going with energy-dense, nutrient-poor foods, it won't work. I used to do that. I have that steak, egg, and cheese bagel that I usually show in some of my other videos. That, beer, sugary drinks, fast food, processed food, highly processed food, are all categories of that. Energy dense, nutrient poor. So you get a lot of calories, but you don't have any usable calories with that. Red Bull is a typical example. It'll boost you up, but you had nothing that'll give you the fuel or building blocks for exercise or building muscle. So you have to really be whole food, mostly plant-based diet, WFPB. Whole food plant-based diet is essentially the Mediterranean diet, and I think that is where you want to get to at least 3 days a week. 3 times a day on your plate, and the plate has to be good, and it should be at least half fiber, and then a quarter protein, and then a quarter fat, healthy fats. That's the way it should be balanced. If you do that, and then you supplement with your protein sources, that would be perfect. I usually like to have more of a protein-dominant breakfast, more of a protein-dominant lunch, and then more of a carbohydrate, low glycemic index carbohydrate dominant dinner. And if you are in the groove and you're about to maximize on your lift or your peak at the 3-month mark, that's where you might want to have more protein. Stuart Phillips did a nice study, and he pushed the envelope using 2.4 grams per kilo of protein for his athletes that he studied. That's a lot of protein. And some athletes, some Olympians will be taking more than that, but the average person usually shoots for about 1.2 grams per kilo. And it translates to about 40 to 50 grams for breakfast, 40 to 50 grams for lunch, and then something else the rest of the day. And that's a lot of protein. Whey protein usually has per scoop about 30. Soy, brown rice, hemp, and pea protein, that's about 20 grams per scoop. So you'd have to take a lot of powder to get to these points, but you have to have this as a building block for this. I think a lot of people used to be worried about kidney problems or gut problems by taking so much protein in. Most of the studies have showed that you can tolerate, people will tolerate that amount of protein. There used to be questions about, because protein has ammonia on it, and if you have that much protein, your body's going to have to cleave off that ammonia somewhere and get rid of it. There haven't been any detrimental studies or any detriment to doing that with regards to kidneys and or gut. Now, having this amount of volume, suddenly, you got to build up to it. Otherwise, the gut will not like what you just put it through. So if you already have an irritable bowel syndrome, a dumping syndrome, constipation or diarrhea, fix that first. You might have to have a probiotic. You might have to see a doctor for your IBS. But even ulcers, fix it first. And that's what brings me to, I didn't put it here, but you cannot take crappy food. You cannot take too much alcohol. You cannot take too much caffeine, because all these things cause reflux. If you've seen my video, DrRic tutorial GERD, you'll see what I mean. Reflux will cause the pacemaker of the entire digestive tract to get screwed up, to be off. You don't need that pacemaker off. You need it to be right on. And that's why you have to eat properly. So if you're going to go a 3-month stretch of seeing what maximum effort will do to bulking up or having a certain body part like arms get bigger, try this for at least 3 months. Dedicate your time, have a calendar, and again, have the deadline so it's easy to maintain objectivity and enthusiasm till that deadline. And then refocus. Either give yourself a break if it's too much, or refocus at the 3-month mark for the next summit. Finally, rest is really important, and everybody just poo-poos that. And all of us have gone through 4-hour days, or 4-hour nights of sleep and gotten through the next day, even taken exams on that little sleep. I think we bastardize the power and potential of rest and sleep. And look where we are. We're a society of coffee drinkers that falls asleep driving, that gets irritable, that gets fat. So I think rest is probably one of the things I would say if you're going to be an athlete, you have to have some form of good sleep. 6 to 8 hours. And it has to be restful sleep where you wake up in the morning, even without an alarm clock, you're good to go, without having that crash in the middle of the day. All of us are allowed to crash, especially with the most boring lectures. But if you crash and it's a routine, or you have to have a nap, that's not restful sleep. If you have to have a bunch of coffee in the morning, that's not restful sleep. And then again, it's going to give you reflux. So those stimulants that are necessary, that means you need to work on your sleep. See my video, DrRic tutorial, Reset Your Clock. And I've got a couple others on how to gain proper sleep and shoot for that. If you're well rested, then what usually happens at night when you're resting is the brain rebuilds, hormones rebuild, like the adrenal rebuilds overnight, and then muscles rebuild. The exercise breaks down and gives the message to the muscle to rebuild. At night is when it rebuilds, if the fuel source is there. See how all this is related? In addition, I think stress is really important. Not stress by itself, but taking care of the stress with a neutralizing stress practice. Mindfulness is really important. If you can kind of squeeze in a mindful practice in on your day, I know this is pretty encompassing, with either meditation before you sleep or mindful exercise at the same time, that'd be great. Power yoga, Tai Chi, all are forms of mindfulness. Hiking with a heavy pack, 40 pounds, in a forest preserve or in nature, in a desert, on the beach. Also exercise. It's not typical resistance exercise, but it'll get you there. Look at some of our armed forces guys. They have to bring backpacks on long hikes, and they are great for it because they have to be ready for the challenge. But stress busting activity, very important, because the more stress you have unanswered, and you don't have to have stress like somebody bullying you, but the more unanswered stress you have, bills of the day, exams of the quarter, challenges with finding a date, lifting a max, or just trying to get to sleep if you have anxiety, that usually brings out that stress hormone cortisol, and when it's secreted all day long, you don't have enough in the morning, it becomes a fatigue issue. So taking care of stress. So having good sleep, taking care of stress, and you always have to have some form of maximum effort and again a goal in mind, because when that comes time, you really have to plan your sleep to engage that maximum effort at the 3-month mark. So if you're kind of skimpy on your sleep now, fix it, reset it. Try your best to reset that before we embark on the exercise routine. Because when you get poor rest, it's easy to get into an overtraining problem. And then again, you're going to fail, you're going to get injured, or there's going to be some form where some kind of frustration when you don't get the gains that you're supposed to get. So that in a nutshell is what I would suggest as a doctor. Now, there are great coaches out there. There are exercise physiologists like the ones I just mentioned. There are also teams that you can join, but see what you can do, what's available for your budget, see what's available for your area, get that personal touch. If you're not getting the gains in 3 months, you need to commit to some other form or have somebody else help you. Otherwise, the efforts that you're doing are probably gaining something, but to get there faster, hopefully this gives a little bit of a push.